At some point, probably in your 20s, someone told you the goal was a good salary. Get the degree, land the job, make the number go up. And for a while, that feels like the entire game. Nobody mentions what comes after. Nobody explains that salary is just the starting point. That what happens over the next 30 years has surprisingly little to do with how impressive the number on your paycheck is, and almost everything to do with decisions nobody ever made mandatory to understand. Welcome to Rich Root, where we break down the financial patterns quietly shaping people's lives, whether they realize it or not.
Today, we're talking about the thing hiding inside your paycheck that most people spend their entire careers never seeing clearly. Actually, 5 things. Let's get into it. 1. Your income is not your financial position. These are completely different numbers. Your income is what arrives. Your financial position is what stays. And the distance between those two numbers, that's your real financial story. Because there's a version of high income that produces almost no wealth at all. And there's a version of average income that quietly builds enormous stability over time. Most people confuse earning well with becoming financially strong. But those are not the same thing. Income can disappear in a month. Wealth keeps working when you stop. That's the difference. And eventually, you realize something important. When people say they want money, they usually don't mean money itself. They mean options. The ability to leave a bad job.
Handle an emergency. Take time off. Change direction without panic. And options don't come from income alone. They come from the gap between what you earn and what your life requires to maintain itself. Which is why the next thing matters more than most people realize. 2. Taxes are the largest expense nobody plans for. Go look at your last paycheck carefully. Federal tax, state tax, Social Security, Medicare. Before your money even reaches you, a large percentage is already gone. And then the remaining money gets taxed again through spending, property ownership, and investment gains. What's strange is that people obsess over cutting small expenses while ignoring the largest expense in their entire financial life. Not because taxes are avoidable, but because a lot of them are manageable. Retirement accounts,
Health savings accounts, employer matches. These aren't hidden loopholes for the wealthy. They're public systems designed to reward people who understand how the rules work. The information isn't secret. Most people just never learn the language early enough to use it properly. And over decades, that difference compounds dramatically. 2 people can earn identical salaries and end up hundreds of thousands of dollars apart financially because one learned how to keep more of what they earned. Which leads directly into the next problem. Because even when people finally start earning more, they often start far later than the math wanted them to. 3. The gap between your age and when you started has a dollar value. This is where personal finance stops feeling motivational and starts feeling mathematical. Time matters more than intensity. At average long-term market returns, money roughly doubles every 10 years.
which means the money invested earliest becomes disproportionately valuable later. The painful part is that you can never fully catch up on lost time. You can contribute more money later.
You can never go back and give your investments more years. That's why someone who starts investing modestly at 25 often ends up ahead of someone investing aggressively at 40. Not because they were smarter, because their money had more birthdays. Most people misunderstand this completely. They treat retirement like a distant, abstract idea in their 20s, and then suddenly treat it like a crisis in their 50s. But financially speaking, the first decade of your working life is one of the most important decades you'll ever have. Even small contributions early matter more than large contributions people postpone for later. And the cost of delaying doesn't appear anywhere visible. Nobody sends you an invoice for missed compounding. The loss stays invisible until one day the gap becomes enormous. And unfortunately, a lot of people make that gap even worse through the next thing. 4. Debt has a metabolism. Not all debt behaves the same way. Some debt sits quietly. Some debt actively consumes your future in real time. High-interest debt is the dangerous kind, because interest doesn't sleep.
A credit card charging 22% interest is compounding against you every single month with the exact same mathematical force investing compounds for you, just in reverse. That's what makes it so destructive. And minimum payments are what make it feel harmless. You keep making payments, you stay current, you feel responsible. Meanwhile, the balance quietly grows roots underneath your financial life. Debt rarely feels catastrophic while it's happening. It feels manageable. That's why people stay trapped in it for years. And the real cost usually isn't the balance itself. It's the opportunity cost. The investments never made. The runway never built. The freedom that money could have purchased later. A few $1,000s of persistent high-interest debt can quietly erase hundreds of thousands of future wealth over time. Not because of one dramatic mistake, because of slow math repeated consistently. And eventually, all of this forces people to confront the final question.
The one most people avoid until much later than they should. 5. Retirement is not an age, it's a number. Most people know the age they hope to retire. Very few know the actual number required to make that possible. But retirement has never really been about age. It's about whether your assets can generate enough income to support your life without employment. That's the equation. Not 65, not 67, not someday. Just math. And once people calculate the number, retirement suddenly stops feeling mysterious. It becomes a target. The people who retire early usually aren't financial geniuses. They simply did the calculation earlier than everyone else. Then they worked backward from it. How much do I need? What savings rate gets me there? How much does my lifestyle require? And then they automated the process and repeated it consistently for years.
That's the strategy. Not exciting, not glamorous, just systematic. Which is probably why so few people stick to it. The bottom line, none of these ideas show up on a report card. Nobody graded you on taxes. Nobody tested you on compounding. Nobody explained runway, debt metabolism, or wealth building during onboarding at your first job. But life keeps score on all of them anyway. And the good news is, that most financial mistakes are recoverable.
Not painless, but recoverable. The one thing that truly doesn't reset is time, which is why understanding this stuff earlier matters so much. The salary was never the answer. It was only the raw material. What you build with it, that's the real financial story. Subscribe if this changed the way you think about money. See you in the next one.